Welcome to the NCO Journal podcast, where we explore NCO professional development. This is a podcast series where we discuss published articles with authors and provide a forum for the open exchange of ideas, information, and solutions. I'm your host, Chago Zapata, managing editor of the NCO Journal at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Today we discuss Sergeant Major Clayton Dos Santos and Mr. James Perdue's article, Battle of Mogadishu, the Mission Command Perspective. With us is Sergeant First Class Osvaldo Equite, NCOIC of the NCO Journal, Staff Sergeant Brandon Cox, Senior Editor and new member of the NCO Journal team, and special guest, Dr. Randy Masten, Army University Press Films Team Chief. Before we kick things off, could you please tell us a bit about yourselves? Dr. Masten, we'll start with you.
Okay, I guess I was enlisted 11 Bravo to E5 before I went to OCS, and out of OCS I became an aviator, so it's close to this mission. And then the final years of my career in the Army, I was a foreign area officer focused on Central Europe. I've got a master's in Russian Eastern European Studies, a MMAS from the Staff College here in Military History, and a PhD in Military History from the University of Kansas.
What's relevant about Mogadishu?
Mogadishu, my dissertation was actually on the Somalia from 92 to 95, focusing on United Nations operations, Somalia, UNISOM 1 and UNISOM 2, and then the interim mission led by the U.S., the Unified Task Force, or UNITAF. And so I've studied it quite a bit, more on the contributions of, the U.S., our UN allies and others, and how that was conducted. The battle itself was a key turning point to ending that mission, and I'm sure we'll get into that as this goes on.
Mr. Perdue, could you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
All right, so I entered the Army back in 1977, a couple of days ago, and went straight into Special Forces right out of basic airborne school, straight into Special Forces. So I did my whole 27 years either in Special Forces or Special Ops community. I made it up through the ranks as Sergeant Major, and during Operation in Mogadishu, the Battle of Mogadishu, I was a Sergeant First Class at the time. I left the unit, became a Sergeant Major, started teaching at the Sergeant's Major's Academy at Fort Bliss, Texas, where I later retired and became a DA civilian teaching at the Sergeant Major Academy, where I presently am now teaching Department of Army Operations. So I hold a master's degree in public administration, a master's degree in leadership, and a master's degree in human resource and development. And I did 27 years total.
Let's jump right in. My first question is, what inspired you to write this article, you and Sergeant Major Dos Santos?
All right, so a little background here. Sergeant Major Clayton and I are currently instructors in the Department of Army Operations here at the Sergeant Major's Academy at Fort Bliss, Texas.
Sergeant Major goes by Clayton. Sergeant Major Clayton.
Clayton, yes, sir.
Okay, so it's
his last name, he goes by his first name then.
His first last name.
Yeah, so in Brazil, they get to pick, since his name is a common name within his army, he uses Clayton instead of his last name.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, that's
all
good.
Right. Sergeant Major Clayton is not a U.S. Army Sergeant Major. He is from the Brazilian Army. He attended the Sergeant Major's course a couple of years ago, I think 1 or 2 years ago. Came back as a international instructor here at the Sergeant Major's Academy. We have several different countries here at the Sergeant Major Academy. I have a Brazilian Sergeant Major with me that teaches in the classroom. And we also have in our department a Singapore. So we have 2 internationals pretty much per department. So we teach in the same classroom. And so each classroom, just so you know a little background, each classroom up here in each department has an active duty and a DA civilian instructor. So the DA civilian instructors were all are retired command sergeant majors or sergeant majors, and all the sergeant major active duty, to include Sergeant Major Clayton, all have master's degrees of some sorts, and some of them actually have PhDs or EDHs. So one day, Sergeant Major was in the office, and I had my Black Hawk Down book in there, written by Mark Bowden. And he looked at it and he asked if he can read it. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and read it. So he read it and said, hey, so since we teach mission command and, decisive action stuff, he said, let's do an article with pertaining to the Battle of Mogadishu with a mission command perspective. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so he likes to write. He does a lot of articles. And so, and that's how I got inspired in writing articles, because his interest in Mogadishu and applying some of the mission command perspectives within the battle.
You said that you took part in that operation. What part did you play? And what was your rank at the time? You said you were a sergeant first class, right? And so
right.
What part did you play?
During the battle itself, I was actually I was in the East, or excuse me, sergeant first class during that portion of the battle, or when that battle occurred. I was the ground force commander's RTO for all the missions we conducted over there. So I served as the assault force commander R2, who was the for that particular mission, Captain Miller, who most know him as today as General Miller, who oversaw the Afghanistan operation during the past several years. And he just retired as a 4-star general. So that's my part is for the whole ground force, assault force, I was the command element's primary RTO. So I basically ran the communications between the commander and all the aircraft, C-2 Bird, back to Fort Bragg, back to the JOC, or TOC back there where General Garrison was. I talked to the assault force. So I had multiple radios in my backpack. So it was pretty heavy, but that was the continuity between the commander and all the C2 elements in the ground force.
And what was your understanding of planning and mission command back then?
So really, back at that time when I was a sergeant first class, I really didn't have a good understanding of planning mission. My understanding of mission command back then was pretty minimal. It wasn't because I was just a sergeant first class at that point, but I really didn't understand the concepts of mission command until I became a sergeant major years later. So my knowledge of mission command back then was pretty minimal.
If you had known about mission command and the whole aspect of mission command, how would that have affected your part out there at the time?
Well, I think critical insights for successful execution mission command as senior NCOs in the future, create a shared understanding. With that said, continually assessing and reassessing the enemy capabilities, update commander's knowledge of the OE, because I think it's very important understanding the operation environment in helping the commander visualize his current end state of the operations. In addition, I'll probably ensure that to be mission successful, I would probably fully understand, I would really understand the commander's intent of the operation. So can understand and the purpose, the key tasks, and his desired end state.
Yeah. When did you arrive in Somalia?
Oh, wow. So the operation was in October 3rd, 3 and 4th. And so I want to say it was back in August, sometime in August we deployed. So we had, but prior to October the 3rd, we had did several other missions up to that point. So I want to say, I want to say mid-August. I can't remember exactly what the date was, 28 years ago. But it was sometime in August. And so I had forgot a lot of the mission until I actually had to, when we did our paper, it brought back some memories, because I had forgot so much 28 years ago, because really never talked about it much. I think the first year or two, it was, kind of big back then, and it kind of died down, because nowadays you ask people not military anything about Black Hawk Down, they give you that blank stare, like, what are you talking about? I mean, I think people in the military, that was in that time frame kind of understand what we're talking about. But I don't think a lot of the people, younger generations, understand Black Hawk Down and what happened during that operation.
Leading up to that day, when you were there, so you were conducting other raids prior to that point?
Yeah, we had conducted, I don't know, 5 or 6 raids successfully up to that point. So you know, that day on 3 October, was, we thought was going to be just a typical another operation, another day walk in the park, as I would say, as far as operation wise. So pretty much like five, I want to say 5 or 6 missions, I guess, and they went off without a hitch for the most part.
Yeah, because like in September, they captured Osmanado. I don't know if you were part of that or not. Which task force were you with?
Task Force Ranger.
Okay, yeah, that was Task Force 225.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were expecting, based on what you said, kind of another walk in the park and an easier mission to accomplish. Had you seen any ratcheting up of, basically the Somalia deeds capabilities or anything to that point?
Well, we did a lot of our operations in the evening, and so we had the element of surprise. We had helicopters. We flew low. We usually went in fast roped in, or we fast roped in for the most part, almost every operation, and so we had the element of surprise. So I truly believe that our unit was by far the best physically fit. We were well trained, well disciplined, well equipped. We had some of the best technology, and that we didn't really think the Somali milita at the NSA at the time, or what is it, national? I can't remember what we called.
The SNA.
Yeah, we didn't think they really had enough. Was going to be much of a factor because we'd already did 5 or 6 missions up to that point successfully. And so I believe we kind of became overconfident in our capabilities. And like the other missions, we probably thought it'd only take a couple hours to complete the mission. And we encountered little resistance on most of those other missions. So based on intelligence, and because of the situation, we had to move fast that day on October 3rd. So what we did was we got our intelligence. We got approximately about 1,500 hours then. And I had to look it up because it's been so long, I couldn't remember the timeline. But it was definitely late in the afternoon. It was still daylight. It was in the heat of the day because I remember it was hot with all the gear on. And we thought it was going to be similar to our previous missions, except for this time it's going to be pretty much in daylight. So I would say a majority, and I can't say everybody because I can't remember what everybody's carrying, but I can tell you that a lot of us did not bring night vision goggles. We didn't bring food. We didn't bring water. We modified some of our equipment. Some of them took out their plates within their body armor and modified their loads. So that was kind of a mistake on our part because I think we got overconfident because of the other 5 or 6 missions. And my takeaway from that is for us as NCOs, we need to be better prepared for the future and train as we fight. Don't take the shortcuts based on previous operations, and always be prepared for the worst, because I don't think, based on all that, like I say, we didn't have, for a 19-hour firefight, we had our basic ammo. We didn't bring really water. We didn't bring any food. So, all that thing adds up. So, basically the end result there is train like you're going to fight, and don't take the shortcuts just because of previous mission. Because once they shot down our helicopters, it no longer became a raid. It became more of a defense of a crash site. And so, once one went down and then the other one went down, we had two crash sites, and we're still fighting our way. And something that I had forgotten, or maybe I didn't realize in our research, it said the first crash site was only about 300 meters from our target building. Well, I can tell you, I never knew it was 300 meters. It felt like it was 2 miles because it took us forever to get to that crash site, because it wasn't just like walk down the street and get to it. There's the streets are dirt, vehicles, and it's hard to maneuver. And so it took us a while. So when I saw that it was 300 meters, when I read it was 300 meters away, I said, man, it seemed like it was, miles away compared to three, because it took us a little bit to get there.
Yeah, because just looking through my notes here, Task Force Ranger landed about 15:40. So yeah, middle of the day, and like you're saying, the dirt, streets. I guess he had a couple injuries just in the fast rope down because of the brownout. They didn't see the
Yeah,
ground.
well, I knew my helicopter had landed before the Rangers, and so I know I was running down the road, and I actually observed the Ranger fall off his fast rope, and he fell a good little ways, because them helicopters, I know our fast ropes was probably the full length, and so it seemed like that fast rope seemed like it took forever by the time he got to the ground, and I saw that Ranger miss the rope and fall, but of course we were still running down the street going to the target building, so. I'm assuming the rest of his Rangers took care of him, but yeah, it was. And then the rotor wash with all that dirt going. If you didn't have goggles on, it pretty much blind with all that dirt going in your eyes.
Yeah, because the planned operation went pretty well. By I think it was 20 minutes, you'd already, captured the 20 some odd people that you were.
Yeah, I think it was like 24 we captured.
So yeah, 24. I think that the key one was Ahmed or Sami, but that part doesn't really matter. So there you are. You've got 24 people that you've captured, and now you got Super 61. I think went down first, and it was Super 64 went down second. That's the one that most people.
Yeah, so being the RTO, I was listening. I can hear the helicopters. I can hear helicopter Super 61, which was actually our helicopter that I had flown on myself and General Miller, Captain Miller back then. That was our lead bird. Super 61 was the lead bird, and so we heard him going down, and so at that point, we had to figure out where it was, and we got guided in by Super 64 at the time, I think it was. And I told the commander, hey, we got another helicopter. Our helicopter just got shot down. And in the process of moving to Super 61's crash site, I heard on the radio that Super 64 was going down. So, but we were still fighting our way to the first one. And so most of us were on our way to Super 61, and none of us ever made it to Super 64. Obviously, I don't know how far that was away. They said it wasn't that far, but I can tell you that at that point, we've been on the ground fighting for a short while, and I think a lot of helicopters were bingo on fuel or getting that away. So I don't think Super 64 had a lot of air coverage at that particular time.
Yeah, no, and Super 64 went down about 20 minutes later.
Yeah, so all relative according to time, kind of, there was no time. It just seemed like everything was, slowed down and speed up at times, and so I had no concept of time other than that 300 meters just seemed like it took forever to get there. I don't know how long it took us to get there. It seemed like forever. It may not have been, but we had to fight our way down the streets to get there.
And had you participated in they'd done like a rehearsal for a downed aircraft drill?
Well, you know what? That's the thing. I think we overlook some drills when we come to that. I think that was kind of one of our shortfalls, because I don't think, even though it was a possibility, I don't think most of us really anticipated helicopters getting shot down. Now, we all knew they're vulnerable. There's not much to a M860 Black Hawk helicopter. They're very vulnerable to RPG, small arms fire. And they were orbiting, when when we did our mission, they were just orbiting using the miniguns. I think we had 1 or 2 snipers in some of the helicopters to help engage. That's where Randy and Shugart, why they were able to fast rope down or get down where Super 6-4 was, because of the fact that they were 2 of the snipers that were lording in the air. So one of the things I don't think we really was prepared for was when we got a helicopter shot down, because I don't think we really planned for it. I don't think we overlooked their capabilities. I think we didn't look at the way they can master RPGs, and they constantly fired RPGs at the helicopters, but I don't think they really hit anything up to that day. But when they hit Super 6-1 and then Super 6-4, we really did not have we only had, I think, 1 CSAR bird. So you could tell you right there, I don't think we were really prepared for helicopters to get shot down. And then having to turn our raid into a defense of a crash site. We spent more time at the crash site than we did on mission by far. So yeah, that's something that I think we could have did better at as far as mission planning, and that is helicopters getting shot down, because they are vulnerable. But I don't think we really took the Somalis serious enough that they were going to be knocking down helicopters.
Well, when you're bringing up the principles of mission command and that operation, that is one of the shortcomings that you mentioned in your article, was that the lack of shared understanding. And maybe Dr. Masten, you can probably talk a little bit about this, of how this ramp up from the enemy was being noted in different areas, but maybe that just didn't get across to the Ranger Task Force.
I think that Adid, and I can't think of his colonel that was doing a lot of this, who'd been an officer in the Somali army, was very well versed in insurgency, counterinsurgency operations, and he was getting them to volley fire like they're RPGs instead of doing them solo, right? Trying to the equivalent of massing fires when your only fires are RPGs, and they had they knocked down a bird, one of our UH-60s, and I'm trying to find in my notes when that was, but it was like in September. It was the first time that one had been shot down by an RPG, so it was like late September, but they had kept stepping up their fire, like they were the first time that one of our aircraft reported being fired upon by really well-aimed ground fire was in September. And so this is, evolving. I mean, we're talking about October 3rd and 4th here. And so, you saw this escalation of, instead of just kind of scattering and fighting, of more, okay, let's start targeting the aircraft. And, at night it's one thing, but during the day it's a little bit easier to put your fire on it. And it's also harder because you're not seeing the muzzle flashes you would at night under goggles. So yeah, it was creeping up, but there really wasn't a belief that they would come after, particularly a task force ranger like they did. I mean, they'd hit the Pakistanis in June at Radio Adid or Radio Mogadishu, and killed 23, I think, Pakistanis on that raid, and that's what precipitated, okay, we're going with a bigger package with Task Force Ranger instead of a smaller one. It was like Operation Gothic Serpent or something was being planned to send in more U.S. troops, and skilled U.S. troops. They wanted to avoid sending in another battalion or brigade, just of ground forces. So yeah, the escalation occurred over time and slowly. So I think it was easy to overlook the increased capabilities that Mr. Perdue and others experienced.
And to caveat on that, I think that they, after 5 or 6 missions, I think they starting to learn how we operate. We had quite a few helicopters every time we went up. We had 4 Little Birds, we had a C2 bird, and we had a multiple number of Blackhawks. So, I think they figured if they can probably stifle our initiative and get one down, that was good for them. And to get 2 of them down was even better. But I think one of the shortcomings, I believe, is when Colin Powell denied General Garrison's request for the AC-130 gunships, which I think was a critical mistake. I mean, the ability to deploy an AC-130 gunship probably could improve both crash site security and hinder the SNA's ability to block, impede, reinforce, and harass the assault force as they were maneuvering through the city, because AC-130 gunships bring down pretty lethal and accurate gunfire. And then, caveat on what I just talked about earlier is the shortcoming was we failed to really develop a plan to execute the operation, protect I look at it as tactical decisive points, which was our Black Hawk, our M60 Black Hawk helicopters. Again, like I said, they're vulnerable, and I think taking one down was a great feat for them, and to get 2 was definitely a feat for them.
Yeah, and also in addition to not sending the AC-130, they also turned down Major General Montgomery's the U.S. Ground
Request for the
Forces
tanks
commander.
and stuff.
Yeah, he had requested the Bradleys at a minimum, and they said no, you're not going to get those, and just turned him down, out of hand in the communications. It wasn't a debate. It was just like, no, you're not going to get those.
Yeah, I could tell you when I was in Grenada, them AC gunships was worth the money. I mean, they took out targets with pinpoint precision, and they're awesome platforms to have up at your disposal.
Yeah, so there must have been a risk acceptance, level from the commanders at that moment to say we're not going to include the AC-130 gunship. We're not going to send in the Bradleys. We're going to do this with this size of a force. So when we're talking about those principles of mission command, I think that was some of the risks that they took, and it didn't turn out in their favor. And then once you're down on the ground, you can't do much with some of those decisions of understanding and risk acceptance. At that point, you have to react and practice some disciplined initiative. And that was one of my questions for you, Sergeant Major, was maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the examples of disciplined initiative that your team took while on the ground.
All right, so I was with the ground force commander. So, some of the things, obviously things changed as the operation unfolded. We actually, after the we got all the prisoners, we moved to the crash site, and so we'd probably we set up a perimeter around the crash site real quick, and Captain Miller at the time assessed the situation, put us in different angles so we can support the crash site, because we had to get them 2 pilots out, and they were stuck within the wreckage because it went down, I think, nose first. I didn't actually see the crash site. I think Captain Miller and a few of the others went to the crash site, and they continued to try to get the pilots out, because our thing is we never leave any fallen comrades behind. So we fought on, we secured the crash site all night long, and we constantly was taking fires from all sorts of directions. We were taking RPGs all night. The Little Birds were a blessing. They stayed engaged the whole time. We were calling danger close fire missions with their rockets. So they were definitely, they weren't C-130s, but they were some of the best pilots out there is them Little Bird pilots from the 160th. And so I know that a couple times we took, commander took some initiative, and I know there's some buildings that was 2-story next to us. And we had called them some fire missions on them. And I think the C2 bird came up one time and said, hey, that's danger close. And then our commander said, hey, if they want it, give it to them. And the pilots came in, just told us to keep our heads low, and they gauged in them targets with the rockets. And that's something that, Captain Miller took the initiative and had them engage them targets, even though they were danger close.
When all this is going on, and now your mission has changed, right? Everything's kind of taken a turn for the worst. What would you say is a couple of questions here? What was the best thing that the leadership on the ground did, your NCOs, your officers, whomever? What was the best thing that they did to ensure that you were pointed in the right direction for success?
Well, I can tell you, the C-2 bird up there guiding and the helicopter support we had was phenomenal. Captain Miller, he didn't make 4-star general for, not being super. He was awesome. He understood the terrain. He understood the enemy being on the ground. That he put the NCOs in points of advantage that would support the perimeter of the first down aircraft, because Somalis were constantly trying to find ways to get within our perimeter, but we held them back all night long. I mean, the guy's phenomenal. I mean, all the NCOs within the unit are just super. I mean, I can't say enough about them. They're just some of the best NCOs I've ever been around. I mean, they're smart, articulate. You don't have to really guide them. They take the self-initiative. There needs to be something to be done. They take the initiative and do it. So I give hats off to those guys. Every single one of them did something heroic throughout the battle. Like I say, Captain Miller, at the point, he was steady talking to the C-2 bird, Colonel Harrell at the time, which was the commander, our squadron commander. And between talking back and forth, he got all the information he needed from the C-2 bird, and he reacted to the situation.
Yeah, those are the lessons that I took from reading your article. As an NCO, those are the lessons that I took with me, that, being able to communicate clearly, being able to, being competent in what you're doing, really is going to pay off dividends when you are in a situation where things are not going to plan. And so being able to have that trust and confidence in your teammates and your leadership to provide the support that you need, knowing that you might be putting yourself in danger, but you're doing so to make sure that your team makes it out of there. Those are some of the things that I took away from the article as lessons learned that all NCOs can take away, right? That they can read this and say, hey, you know what? We did make some mistakes. We could have done things better. But at the end of the day, and I'm stuck in that situation, here's what I can do, or here's how I better prepare for that.
I think based on our training, the outstanding leadership we had, we didn't lose as many as we probably could have in that environment. Now looking back after the mission's already been conducted, I probably would, as command sergeant major or sergeant major or someone in charge, I'd probably ensure that we were better prepared for a mission. And by saying that, we were prepared, but bring all the required equipment needed for the mission. Okay. I mean, be prepared for that follow-on mission. Be prepared for, them helicopters going down. Be prepared for staying on instead of 2 hours, 19 hours. Make sure that we have a better shared understanding of the OE and the enemy, and ensure that everybody is involved in the mission orders, mission planning, because a lot of times it happened on the fly. Intel will come in, a known enemy combatant was at a certain location. We had to react. And so a lot of times we're getting our mission as we're getting to the helicopter. Everybody's okay. This is the mission. We're going to hit this target building, this, that. You're going to be the blocking force and so forth. So I think incorporating everybody, if time was permitting, to get fully understand on the mission prior to, deploying with the helicopters. Also, I think we could done a better job incorporating the 10th ID in the training in the event that we needed QR force, and it could probably helped us better execute QRF by involving them in our training and letting them know what was going on. Again, because of our leadership and our training, I think we made a bad situation into a good situation the best we could.
Some things just aren't necessarily, as an NCO, they're not necessarily uh, part of your responsibility. So you have to react and be prepared. I think that's what it all comes down to. Which brings up one of the questions that we have here was, and you answered it just brilliantly just now, about what would you do if you were command sergeant major back then, and under those
Yeah, and
circumstances. So
exactly. I think that's what I just talked about. Bringing the required equipment, shared understanding, making sure everybody's involved in mission planning, mission orders, and or incorporating other units that we may need in there. Again, we didn't do that because I don't think we fully understood that, or we didn't think they had the capabilities knocking out one helicopter, let alone two helicopters. And again, up to 5, 6 missions prior to that, we were in and out in no time, with very minimal injuries and so forth. And so I think we took that same approach on 3 October.
What was something that you learned that you didn't know before while you were researching for this article?
Well, I don't think I learned a lot researching articles since I was there and lived the experience firsthand. It brought back a lot of memories that I had long forgot. One of the things that I did learn, and again, I didn't realize it. I think some of the research said we were only 300 meters away. It seemed like a lot longer than 300 meters when we had to fight our way to that down Super 6-1, that first helicopter got shot down. It's when, if you'd have told me it was 300 meters, I'd say no, it wasn't no 300 meters. So that's something that I learned. And then I believe I wish Sergeant Major Clayton would have been available, but he learned a lot of the details about the mission and some of the mission command considerations, such as the faulty planning with the AC-130, the lack of shared understanding, intel that was inaccurate, their analysis was inaccurate of the enemy capabilities. And then, he also took away some of the delayed communications, how we had to go through certain, echelons before we get certain information sent back to us.
During the battle where you guys were more defending the perimeter, did you notice anything from any of the NCOs that showed a superior just taking control or showing?
Well, you know what? Most our unit is NCO heavy. I mean, I was a sergeant first class at the time, and I think the majority of the people were. I don't think we had anybody less than a staff sergeant. So most of the individual were in my little perimeter with Captain Miller was one of our troop sergeant majors and a couple other sergeant first class. We had a few in our area. We had I also had a CCT guy in our perimeter, the primary medic on the ground force medic. So he was taking care of a few casualties we had within our perimeter. But everybody, those individuals, you don't have to direct them. They see it and they take the initiative to make sure that whatever they're doing is correct. So at the end of the day, self-initiative was not an issue. They did that, and they did it well.
Mr. Perdue, this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with mission command, but from my experiences, one of the things I remember, like if I think back on my time in Iraq, sometimes I think about a specific thing and I smell the smells, the sights, everything just kind of pops into my brain. I smell those things. I almost feel them. Is there anything that jumps out to you about your experience out there, about when you were out there, the smells, the feel, the grit? I don't know. Anything jump out at you?
Yeah, you know what? I could tell you that I was never more thirsty than on that mission. Of course, we hadn't drink. Well, it was broad daylight when it was hot. You're in a firefight or you're engaging the enemy for hours. And I remember, one of the things I remember the most is when the 10th Mountain Division came in. We got pretty used to the 50 cal shells falling from the little birds. And when they're firing over you, they fall. Some if they gets inside the back of your shirt, it's hot. It'll burn you real quick. And soon, first time they came over and they start dropping all them 50 cal shells, I noticed all of them hit the dirt because they're not used to the shells falling down on the ground around them, and then the little birds going. And the little birds ain't that far high above you. They're pretty low, and but some of them, things that stand out to me is just it was just constantly gunfire. So when I hear a lot of gunfires, and I think the movie portrays it pretty good. I mean, if you think about it, a movie portrays a 19-hour firefight or battle in a couple hours. They got to keep it short. Sometimes a little bit more glorified than what actually on the ground, but then again, it's the opposite. Sometimes it's the opposite of what they show in the movie. But one of the things I take away, I remember the most from that battle is when we finished that mission and we got back to our hangar, we were de-kitting and stuff. And, it was a long night. I mean, it was all day and wasn't until the next morning until we got extracted. But we had a big TV in our hangar, and it was really demoralizing, and it really hit home when we saw Super 6-4 crew chiefs, or the crew of Super 6-4 minus Michael Durant, because he was a POW at that time. But the crew members from Super 6-4, Randy and Gary, they're stripped down, they're tied up, hands tied up, and being dragged down the streets of Mogadishu. That was an eye opener for us, and that really hit me hard. Seeing that, I think it devastated everybody. Just seeing our fallen comrades that we couldn't do anything to get to, being treated in such a manner.
I appreciate you taking the time to be a part of this conversation and to publish with us as well. I know that it's a big deal.
Yeah, I tell you, it was fun doing the article. And it brought back a lot of memories. I'd probably forgotten so much. I mean, it's 28 years ago. You don't forget everything. There's certain things you remember, but I had to jog my memory on some of the times and some of the things we did. And I remember, like I say, I could tell you sitting in there after a while, I would have gave a whole paycheck for water. And I know that we did a resupply. And a helicopter, I can't remember what helicopter came in, and they kicked out crates of loaded magazines for us that was already loaded, 5-gallon water cans, a whole lot of more IVs, because we need a lot of IVs. We had a couple casualties that was immediate evac in our location, and I'm sure all the other ones had too, because we had 70 something wounded throughout the battle. So some of them were critical, some of them weren't as bad, but those are some things that I take away that I won't forget. But the biggest takeaway is the camaraderie and just the sheer excellence of these soldiers that fought that night. And wasn't for their bravery and their training and their leadership, it would have been a lot worse than what it was.
Mr. Perdue, I had a question real quick.
Okay.
I was wondering, do you keep in contact with any of these guys? And I was kind of wondering how this experience has shaped or changed your life after the fact.
Well, I could tell you it's changed my life in an aspect of, I used to get upset about certain little things. I don't really get mad that much anymore, based on the fact that I always bring it back to Mogadishu. I say, well, if I didn't survive that night, like Randy and Gordon and some of the other ones that we lost, this whatever it is in my life really wouldn't matter. So my wife, when I first come back, I think that first year was kind of tough, to be around, because it was just rough. That was a tough time in my life. But after that, I think it changed for the good. My attitude towards the little things, I don't get bothered. And my wife said, nothing bothers you no more. And I tell her, well, if I died in Somalia, none of this right here going on really would matter. So that's something that I kind of changed my attitude towards. And I think in that aspect, when something's going bad, really bad, I'll just say, hey, if I died in Mogadishu, this really wouldn't matter right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, not everybody has your experiences, but even myself, I always say, well, it's not as hot as Kuwait or it's not as cold as Fort Drum. You know what I mean? So,
It's funny though how one day. I mean, that's one day in your life, and it can affect the rest of your life. I've had days like that, and it's funny how that works.
Well, I never went and got checked for PTSD, and and I probably had some form of it, but I dealt with it. But when I see war movies, it kind of brings me back. When I see what the casualties and things they're going through, unless you actually been deep it, you really, and I think Save It Private Ryan on the beach, that assault really hit home because it really shows the aspects of people getting wounded, losing limbs. I mean, most Army movies you see, they get shot and they fall down. But I think Private Save It Ryan was really on the beach, really is an eye opener for what really goes on. And, I don't think most of us are ready to see your best friends, killed in action. I think we had quite a few body bags at the Pakistani, what do they call it, Pakistani stadium, where we end up going to after
Oh,
the
Olympic Stadium.
Olympic Stadium. Yeah. So yeah, in the movie, that little portion, the guys running down the road was the command group because we really didn't have any more vehicles. But eventually, one of the APCs came back and picked us up, and it was kind of ironic. I was one of the first ones to jump in the APC, and there was 2 young Rangers in there, and everybody jumped on top of me. So I'm on the bottom of this APC, and I got 4 or 5 people on top, and I mean, it was hard to breathe, and good thing I had a rucksack, and it probably saved me from being crushed. But this young Ranger, I'll never forget him. He was saying, "Hey, Sarge, don't worry about it. It's gonna be all right." And I'm like, "Just let me out this APC. I'll take my chance." And the ironic thing is, a couple years after that, several years, I don't know exactly. So I've been teaching Sergeant Major's Academy for 17 years now. He came through and he said, "You remember me?" And I said, "No." He said, "I was the one in APC that was talking with you as we exfilled." And I thought that was, you know, phenomenal that he remembered me because I couldn't remember his name, but he remembered me, I guess, from being, one of the ground force, part of the assault force. I thought that was amazing.
hey, sir, I had one last question for me.
Okay.
With all of your experience, being a sergeant major retired, now teaching a sergeant major academy, what is some good Mr. Perdue advice that you would give to young non-commissioned officers?
Wow. I would say young non-commissioned officers, I would say, one of the biggest thing I would say, and I always, as a sergeant major, I would always say, train as you're going to fight. When we go out and do, um, you know, movement of contact or raids or ambush, I would always make sure I'd get 1 or 2, wounded casualties because realistically, when you're in a heavy firefight, you're going to take some casualties. You're going to get some injuries for the most part, I believe. So I would make them carry those individuals for exfil, for realism. So again, realism training, don't take shortcuts because the shortcuts will get you. And I firmly believe train as you're going to fight. And if you do it well, you'll come out successful for the most part.
There's another question. Again, it doesn't. Well, I don't know that it's not directly related to the mission command aspect of the article, but there's something that you said you were awarded a Silver Star. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I think back in June of this past year, I came home from work, and my wife said there's a certified letter sitting on the table. So I'm thinking that's probably something to do with my VA claim or whatever it may be. And I opened it, and I started jumping up and down. And my wife said, "What is it?" I said, "They just upgraded my Bronze Star with Valor to a Silver Star." And she goes, "And so?" And I'm like, "Never mind, don't forget about it." But the Silver Star, I went back 1 October this past a couple months ago. In 1 October, I flew back to Fort Bragg, and I think they awarded like 36 of us a Bronze Star with Valor, upgraded to a Silver Star. And I could just, instead of trying to explain what it is, I'll briefly read it to you. the citation. I had to pull it out because I hadn't did anything with it. But the
Yeah, please read away.
okay, so the citation reads like this. So you can get a feel for kind of the battle itself. It says for gallantry in action from 3 October 83 to 4 October 93 to 4 October 93, while serving in support of Operation Unisom 2 in Mogadishu, Somalia. Sergeant First Class Purdue's team fought through intense enemy resistance during the time numerous friendly casualties were suffered in order to reach a downed helicopter crew and still trap pilot before the enemy. Throughout the entire operation, displayed great personal and courage, competent, complete disregard for his own safety. Sacks resulted in both a successful raid and defense of a crash site. And so that's really the whole gist of, where a lot of the heroism from everybody. I mean, there's probably, as a matter of fact, I think too, the personnel that was originally awarded the Silver Star was upgraded to the Medal of Honor. I can't remember the two that one of them was posthumously, but so a couple of, I think 4 of the Silver Stars were also upgraded to Medal of Honor from that particular battle. I don't think I really did anything heroic. I think I did my job. I could tell you that there's many that did, in my eyes, that did horror, did stuff that was just phenomenal, and they didn't think twice about doing it. But again, when it comes to fellow comrades, we take that seriously, and we never want to leave anybody behind. And to see, like I say, to see Randy and Gary being drugged down the street like that was, I guess, a kick in the gut for most of us.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to read that and tell us about it. I think that's it's still, whether you believe that you were heroic or not. I think we're here at the NCO Journal. We're very proud of you and very proud that you joined us and talked about your experience and about your article, of course. Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Masten, thank you for joining us as well. Appreciate you spending the time taking the time to come join us and be a part of this conversation. And we'd like to thank our audience. Remember to put your knowledge to the page, submit articles, and get published with the NCO Journal. Don't forget to check out our webpage and follow us on social media. We'll catch you next time on the NCO Journal podcast.